Good morning, Oneness CSL. It is really a delight to be with you and our global family exploring the ebb and flow of spiritual living. I'd like to begin in the acknowledgement that Colombia is on the sacred traditional territory of the Piscataway, and we are heart grateful. This Sunday, we are concluding our monthly theme, Many Paths, One Journey, as we explore the idea of dissolving our defenses in circumstances we don't understand to allow the sacred of what is to come forward. Just take that in for a moment. How comfortable are we saying, live and let live? And how comfortable are we in practicing live and let live? What a gift, really, it is to allow life to be just as we see it, embraced in the understanding that what lies before us and what lies behind us are small matters to what lies within us. Most importantly, we can then begin to see that nothing or no one outside of us has any power over us except that which we choose to give it or them. This world, it's in such transition from what was to what is. And so is this community. And so are we as individuals. And what I know is that we will emerge with an even greater sense of self and meaning of life. This process can be described as natural evolution. And we know that evolution comes after consciousness. So consciousness precedes evolution. And it rarely has an entire world in a state such as this. In other words, an entire world right now being subject to a serious dis-ease where there is an evident and obvious breaking down, calling new life into being. What an astounding time to be alive, both to witness and take our own time in building anew. Well, we have a tool in our kit. It's called spiritual tools, for which I, for one, am most grateful. Being a student of metaphysics, I realize that I am with creation and think, act, and express and experience by means of the law of cause and effect. I am the orchestrator of my life and have full faith in my senior partner who knows all. Now, this can be very helpful when I don't, or even when I think I do when I don't. I've come to welcome the natural breaking down to breaking through in a higher order as the life-death cycle. And it grows my capacity as a divine human being, which I'm sure all of you can attest. I know that when the breaking down is occurring, there is a part of us that holds on for dear life so as not to experience that death or that loss, that grief or pain or chaos, confusion, oh my gosh, and fear, of course, of the unknown. I know that when I feel the ground beneath my feet falling away, I return to love. I return to love. The unfailing, creative, impartial, and undefended energy of all creation and my true nature. How glorious it is to remember and revive the truth of who and whose we are. And this can only happen when we allow ourselves to dissolve our defenses, to become vulnerable and humble and trusting and sensitive to our essence. What is essence? It is the inherent, unchanging nature of a thing. And with regards to us, it is our innate defining substance. It is not the person we have learned to be or have been conditioned to believe we are. It is the elemental, like a prime number. It cannot be broken down into component parts. We do not have to be able to understand our essence or be able to express it, simply keeping it in our conscious mind that a world of riches lies within invites this reality into our subconscious. This pristine level of being can most easily be seen, I think, in babies. Oh, or puppies. Okay, I'm a dog person. And in those who have attained a deep sense of joy found within the embracement of their humanity. Now, in both, there's an uninhibited and undistracted attention to the moment, an innocence. Remember the last happy baby you were in the presence of, whose face was so bright and expansive, like a cloudless sky, whose delight ripples so entirely through their body that a smile on their lips completes itself in the kicking of their tiny little feet and expressing a sheer joy in life by thrusting both hands widely into the air. Oh my gosh. Very little obstructs the spontaneous, ecstatic openness of their essence. Now, can you imagine yourselves revealing your essence in this manner? Go ahead. Start smiling. Kick your feet. A few thoughts get in the way, don't they? Now, we have all experienced this in our own different ways, but we all share the same thing. We have, in those moments, exemplified what it was to be a free human being. In this domain of essence that lies below our patterns of self-protection and self-presentation, our ways of relating are genuinely intimate. They are spontaneous, unrehearsed, non-reactive, undefended, awake and alive. Ubuntu is a word rooted in the South African tradition, which means a person becomes human through other persons. Archbishop Desmond Tutu describes Ubuntu as the opposite, actually, of I think, therefore I am. In other words, my humanness is inextricably bound up in yours. Now, this truly is creating from one's essential self, where one finds the liberation through living. It's like the path of the Dharma, the journey of liberation from fear and illusions. Ubuntu means to embody our humanness, not nullify it. I love what Dr. Ernest Holmes says in the front part of his text, The Science of Mind. He says, "Peace be unto you, stranger." He says, "I've given the gate open, and thou art welcome to my home. There is room in my house for all. The room is warm and cheerful, and you will find comfort and rest there. I have swept the hearth and lighted the fire. The table is laid with the fruits of life and spread before thee. The wine is here also, and it sparkles in the light. I have set a chair for you, where the sunbeams dance through the shade. Sit and rest and refresh your soul. Eat of the fruit and drink of the wine. All is yours, and you are welcome here." Ubuntu. I am a person who becomes human through other persons. Now, when we live from our essential nature, we do feel a sense of mutual beingness with all of life. We feel both our individuality and our unity at the confluence of where the inner meets the outer. This awareness is a simultaneous presence of belonging that transcends observer and observed, subject and object, inner and outer, self and other, spirit and world. This is what Reverend Jenna was talking about when the sacred activism of becoming aware, the practice of becoming aware, joins this idea of the mystical essential nature. When I enter a state of relatedness instead of avoiding relationship, it's brought me closer to others, to life and myself. I've understood in these feelings of intense belonging the words of Jesus when he said, when you make the two one, and when you make the inner as the outer, and the outer as the inner, and above as a below. And when you make the male and female into a single one, then shall you enter into the kingdom. In life, we're never alone. The more deeply we understand our intrinsic relatedness, we see how liberation is not possible without other people. Choosing interrelated presence, bringing oneself to each moment, heart and soul, and thereby occupying ordinary mutuality, will remove the need of our transcendent agenda. It brings us into the moment for not other purpose or another purpose, just to be together. And that togetherness doesn't even have to be particularly spiritual. Naturalness is enough. So in my observations, defenses come from two core false beliefs. The first is that we are not enough, and we look to the world to fill in the blanks. The second is the world is a scary place, and I need to protect myself from it. You know, a mantra I've used with the most impact most recently in my life is, I am the freedom that I seek, and I am the need that I want to have met. Freedom. Freedom is the emancipation of consciousness from all forms of self-generated conflict. Now, in this, I'm not talking about the absolute end of human suffering or a transcendental experience of unshakable stillness and joy. I mean, attuning to the rhythm of our own uniqueness, an ease of being that allows us to dance to the music we hear in our own hearts, as we have an abiding respect for our own imperfect wholeness. Who needs to be perfect when you can be human? Oh, I'm sure a lot of you are resisting that statement. Oh my gosh. Oh, how many years have you struggled for this elusive perfection? You know, so natural freedom is the condition of being that precedes everything. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke stated, "For where I am closed, I am false." Some say we must be vigilant in our defense against indoctrination. She says, what if we simply stayed focused on our own truth? Some say we must not let anyone shape us in the image of another's dogma. What if we, in loving kindness, honored all life and stayed focused on our own truth? Some say, don't even let teachers call you their student unless that is what you want. What if we saw all persons on equal footing and stayed focused on our own truth as we learned from each other? There is no core philosophy that will free our minds. Being free frees the mind. Freedom is the only religion, and it's where all true religion meets. So if we are to live freely, intimately with life, in an undefended stance, we will need to know what we really want in relationship. We need to uncover what needs we would be willing to sacrifice for the fulfillment of the most important need in relationship. Natural freedom precedes ideas of liberation. It undermines dogmas, doctrines, mythologies, self-images, attainments, contracts with perfection, and all other inherited forms of self-protections and self-enhancements. Natural freedom precedes these self-delusions, but it also exceeds them. It is a paradoxical and inclusive sense of being. Simply stated, natural freedom is the ability to live and die right now with a shameless sense of goodness and beauty. We must elevate authenticity to the highest status. And this process requires a radical acceptance of who we are and feel ourselves to be in our essence. And from this juncture, we express our creative passions, inhabiting every dimension of our being as natural to our whole, the good, the bad, and the ugly. As a member of a spiritual community and a global community, we must ask ourselves this. What role do we each play in our relationships or community situations as they are appearing now? And what role can we play in moving it into what we would like it to see and to see it as? Where is the minister in me? And to answer that question, of course, we must ask another one. How much of my experience is mine? And answer it, all of it. Whether it was handed down in our DNA or in our face, we accept it all or we don't. We identify ourselves by it or we don't. I love this cartoon that was published in the New Yorker magazine some time ago. In it, two caterpillars are looking up at a butterfly in a tree, and one caterpillar turns to the other to say, "You'll never catch me up there." Just as the caterpillar and the butterfly live in two very different environments, the experience of one stage of relating doesn't necessarily prepare us for the experience of the next. Without a clear vision of the way relationship would look, without our usual defenses, we will, like a caterpillar, remain unconscious and resistant and frightened of transformation. Getting a sense of the bigger picture will support us through the inevitable discomfort of the passage. From a caterpillar's perspective, the cocoon is seen as a death chamber, whereas from the butterfly's perspective, the cocoon is the passageway to birth and liberation. The journey to undefended love calls for that radical shift in consciousness. This new reality cannot be extrapolated from our old ways of connecting. And it is not an extension of where we find ourselves today. It's like the transformation from caterpillar to butterfly. The entire form changes, and the experience is one of dissolution and liberation. Undefended connection and relationship, however, can feel very unsafe, out of control, and very uncomfortable. It is a metamorphic process in which we are not controlling the connection, but becoming absorbed by it and transformed through the contact. The intention is not simply to share our lives, but to peel back the many layers of life. We are not moving side by side. We are actually intermingling and intersecting each other's paths. Instead of exchanging stories, we are unraveling them. What does it mean being vulnerable? Does it mean disempowered or empowered? What I notice in my life is that when I'm not dissolving my defense, I could be contracting from pain. Also, when I'm not dissolving my defense or defenses, I am contracting sometimes from pleasure. Have you ever recoiled because you couldn't tolerate or cope with all the love you were receiving? Having reached your upper limit or your capacity for receiving intimacy or emotional intensity? I certainly have. When life gets uncomfortable, we often tend to make the experience wrong, and we seek to change it or override it, leaving ourselves and each other. We separate out, we go away. We can leave physically by, exercising, sleeping, even cleaning the house. We can leave mentally by analyzing, rationalizing, intellectualizing, justifying. We can leave emotionally. We can shut down. We can become ambivalent or confused. We can indulge in eating, shopping, TV, work. You get the picture. But what if we were to let the discomfort override our defenses, staying present with the uncontrollable experience until it shifts? Always remembering that feelings come in waves. They begin and swell, and then they subside. They are always in motion. And when we feel ready to give up, this is the time when healing can be found in the tenderness of the pain itself. We must come to the place where we let ourselves face what we have spent our life energy avoiding. We must know the anguish of believing this mistaken view of ourselves, recognizing the pain of having abandoned ourselves when we have felt so alone in the past, and open up to the fountain of compassion that springs forth from our hearts. It is here we can enter the void, the abyss, and find what all spiritual traditions eventually address, that in the end, it is not pain that we are afraid of, it is emptiness. We would rather stay in our deficiency than experience this. We'd rather hate ourselves than be nothing. It is here, in the void, we become one, no longer defined by who we are or we aren't, but by what we are, the eternal spirit. We lose ourselves by letting go of the observer. In this sense, we lose ourselves and find ourselves. We lose what we no longer need and find what has never been lost. One of the challenges we face in cultivating intimacy is the habit of postponing the work we need to do on ourselves. In part, this comes from the illusion that we have endless time, and we don't. I want to share a story with you. It's called The Giver. There's a crowded school, too many children running around, and the teacher needs to upgrade the quarters in which they gather every day. One day, a wealthy merchant gave to the teacher a sufficient amount to afford a grand addition onto the building. Now, he was puzzled, though, by his lack of gratitude at his generous gesture. The merchant stated how much gold was in the bag that he gave to the teacher, to which the teacher replied, "I know, you already told me that." The merchant says, "Are you not grateful at my donation for your needs? Even though I am a wealthy merchant, the amount I give you is still a lot of money." The teacher says, "Do you want me to thank you for it?" "Well, you ought to. Why should I?" The teacher says, "The giver should be thankful." And so it is with life. When it moves through us naturally and freely, without our ideas of needing to get from outside of ourselves as our primary focus. We need to become masters of approving rather than improving, so that we stop looking over our shoulder to look only to our hearts, to build that ongoing permission to stumble as well as to sprout improbable wings. One day the flip will happen. The flip comes complete with intermittent uncomfortable feelings and circumstances, but we can turn away from handing our power over and turn towards the inquiry into it. Even if our knees are shaking and our feet feel small, every obstacle becomes an entry point to experiencing deeper levels of connection with some lost aspect of our being. There will always be that inevitable earthquake beneath and between our connection with another. But rather than focusing on the tremendous devastation and destruction resulting from these earthquakes, it is the precise moment to remember the deep connection we have felt when our brothers and our sisters around the world have come together to rebuild a town, a city, the spirit of the multitudes of families at a loss. When we can master approving of ourselves to the point of appreciating our humanness, our relationships will feel so rich and full. So rich and full of texture that perfection will become a thought of the past. O Great Spirit, O Great Spirit, earth, sun, sky, and sea, you are inside and all around me. And so it is.